Spoiler warning! This video will discuss story events and related game mechanics that don't appear in the game until the player has cleared a significant amount of the story. Furthermore, there will be some critique of the plot and references to events from the prequel game. Watching my review of said prequel before this one is highly recommended, as I will reference it frequently. There will be another spoiler warning when it's time to discuss the plot, but be warned that other sections of this video will not be able to avoid some spoilers here and there. I will try to keep things vague prior to the second spoiler warning. If you're not okay with that, this video is not for you. Oh, yes. As soon as you open the game, you can hear it. They came in guns blazing with this one. Mega Man Battle Network 2 is a game that was originally released for the Game Boy Advance in late 2001 for Japan and in early 2002 for North America. That's not even a full year after the first game. You might remember from my review of the prequel that it's currently available as part of the first Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection on PC, PlayStation, and the Nintendo Switch. I already told my story of how I originally got into the series last time, so this time we can just go straight into the review. Some things have carried over from the previous game, so this review is going to spend less time explaining the old mechanics that remained and more time comparing and discussing what has been changed or improved. And I'll tell you right now, they fixed a lot of the issues with the previous game. If you were satisfied with the prequel, this game will make it hard for you to go back. That's how much of a step up this was. The game takes place shortly after the events of Battle Network 1, which itself took place in the year 2000X, an unspecified time in the 21st century, in a universe where technological advancement in networking is all the rage. We still have a wide range of machines and devices in the world that can be accessed and operated by digital companions known as network navigators, or NetNavis for short. It's a world full of smart devices, and this time around, we have actual instances of security measures being put in place to prevent bad guys from using their NetNavis to cause chaos. But they still do it anyway. The programs, also known as Mr. Progs, or simply Progs, are still the main entities in charge of running these devices, and are still as helpless as ever when criminals strike. Sometimes they fail at their jobs even when criminals don't strike. So of course, you, taking control of the protagonists, Lan Hikari, a 5th grader trying to keep himself entertained during his summer vacation, and his reliable NetNavi Mega Man, will have to do what the Progs cannot to resolve any problems that you come across. And you always come across problems because these two are like a magnet for trouble. Lan takes care of whatever problems he can in the real world, while Mega Man gets logged in, or as the game says, jacked in, to various devices where he then proceeds to shut down or reclaim control of said device's functions, which often requires taking out viruses or even criminal NetNavis that have hijacked the device. But Mega Man does not fight alone. As Mega Man's net operator, Lan carries him around in a device called a personal terminal, or PET for short, through which he is able to send Mega Man all kinds of useful tools known as battle chips. After transporting Mega Man from the PET to another device, as long as the PET is connected, sending battle chips and communicating with Mega Man remains possible. You can press a button at any time to communicate with Lan if you're playing as Mega Man, or talk to Mega Man when playing as Lan to hear their thoughts on the current situation, which can often help with figuring out what to do next. When the job is done, Mega Man can usually be called back to the PET immediately no matter where he is within a network. That's the setting. Now let's look into the gameplay and how it's changed since Battle Network 1. The core idea behind the gameplay remains the same as before. You move around between locations in the real world as Lan, picking up hidden items and occasionally solving some puzzles, or you navigate the cyber world as Mega Man, fighting viruses and the occasional NetNavi along the way. The battle system still has you moving around a grid and using battle chips or the Mega Buster to defeat your opponents, who now have names that you can see in the top right corner at the start of every battle. The rules for evaluating your performance, aka your busting level, which determines the possible drops you get from opponents, remain the same as before, but the game still gives you an unskippable tutorial which allows you to immediately see one major change to the battle system. In the previous game, the Add button would simply expand your hand by 5 chips, no questions asked, and the expanded hand would then go back down to the original 5 after you select chips from it. This would give you up to 15 chips to choose from if you used the Add function twice in a row. That's no longer the case here. In Battle Network 2, you have to choose chips to sacrifice in order to expand your hand. If you pick 3 chips and then hit Add, then on your next turn, you end up with 3 more slots to work with. This essentially means that you'll draw 6 new chips on the next turn, 3 to replace the ones you sacrificed, and 3 more to occupy the newly opened slots. The maximum number of extra slots you can get is 5, but once they're opened, they remain available for the rest of the battle. Any chips you sacrificed will remain discarded until the end of the battle, as if you had simply used them normally. There are a few other changes that become more obvious after the tutorial. One that isn't even mentioned by the game at all is the fact that chip codes are now visible under the icons in the chip select window. This means that you no longer have to highlight the chips in your hand to see what their codes are, allowing you to make faster selections if you already know what your battle plans are. Additionally, once a chip is selected, any chips that can't be selected with it will automatically be darkened, so you don't have to waste time hovering over chips you can't use. This has the added effect of passively teaching the player about the rules of chip selection if they didn't pay attention to or didn't understand the rules when they were mentioned in the tutorial. These changes encourage players to start paying more attention to chip codes when building their chip folders, which you could afford to ignore in the previous game because, back then, we were allowed to have up to 10 copies of the same busted chip in our folder. That's no longer the case here, as the maximum number of allowed duplicates has been brought down to 5. There was a reason why I told viewers to enjoy it while it lasts in my previous review. Battle Network 2 is the game that's going to make you learn. There are 2 saving graces here. One is the introduction of the asterisk chip code, or star code as I like to call it. Any chip with a star code can be selected with any one other code in the same turn. For example, you can pick a star code chip along with all of these O code chips. However, if you pick chips with different codes, which can only happen if the chips selected are duplicates of each other, then a star code chip cannot be selected with them unless it happens to be yet another duplicate of those chips. The star code is often found on support chips that you'd want to use with practically anything and everything, like the Invis battle chip, which grants you temporary invincibility frames. You no longer have to use it on a separate turn if you want to use a more combat-oriented chip while invincible, allowing you the opportunity to stay safe while also defeating the enemy fast enough to get a good chance of obtaining the chip you want from them. Some of these chips can still be obtained in regular letter codes, but if you have them in star code, that's definitely preferred. Other star-coded chips can only exist in star code, and the most notable example of this is the Attack Plus chips. This type of chip is specifically designed to increase the attack power of the chip that gets selected before it, and it wouldn't be fair to limit its effect to 5 distinct letter codes, so these chips will only ever occur in star code. That's your basic introduction to star-coded chips. They can give you some flexibility in the early game when you don't have a lot of chips with identical codes in your folder, and they make for good filler chips to toss into your folder when you're not sure what else to use, as they can be easily discarded with other chips through the add function to expand your hand quickly. Now let's move on to the other saving grace that this game introduces to the series. This one is pretty straightforward to explain, but can be quite deep when it comes to the decisions you have to make. Introducing the regular chip. You may have noticed that battle chips now have file sizes listed beside them when viewed in the chip folder or the pack. You may also notice that you have a file size listed up here that isn't listed next to a battle chip. That is your regular memory, or the maximum size chip you are allowed to use as your regular chip. Any one chip in your folder that is at or below your regular memory can be selected as the regular chip, and once set, will automatically be the first chip that shows up in your hand at the start of any battle. You can increase your regular memory by picking up a new type of power-up that this game introduces. It's called a Reg Up, and can increase your regular memory by 1, 2, or sometimes even 3 megabytes at a time. Once you find all of them, your regular memory will be sitting at a solid 50 megabytes, meaning that any chips above 50 megabytes can never be used as a regular. They can't let you have too much power after all. But even at the beginning of the game, when all you have is a meager 4 megabytes to work with, choosing wisely can help set you on the right track to getting better busting levels. More on this later. Continuing with noticeable changes from the previous game, we have HP permanence. Mega Man's HP no longer resets to its maximum after the end of every battle. Anytime you're moving through the net as Mega Man, you can now see his current HP in the upper left corner of the screen, which starts at full every time you jack into a network, but will adjust to whatever health you had left after finishing your most recent battle. You can no longer get away with the reckless playstyle of just tanking hits while you aggressively attack the enemy. You have to learn how to dodge. You have to pay attention to enemy mechanics, and will likely want to include some recovery chips in your chip folder. You may find yourself wanting to run from battles if you don't think you have the health to survive them, and now you can do that without having to use the escape chip from the previous game. The chip is still present in this game if you want a guaranteed escape, but otherwise you can now attempt to run from battles anytime you have the chip select screen opened, and it can even work against Ghost Navi encounters. In addition to being useful for survival, it can help when you're just in a hurry and don't have the time to deal with random encounters, though you will retain any damage taken before you escape, will lose the opportunity to earn a battle reward, and could potentially be in trouble if your escape attempt fails. If you don't want to take that risk with an escape attempt, there may be times where, instead of escaping, you find yourself prolonging battles on purpose while waiting for your recovery chips to come out so you can make sure to go into your next battle with a good amount of health. Finally, this game introduces consumable items to the series called sub-chips, and 2 of them are specifically made for healing Mega Man's HP while outside of battle. So now we know that this game wants you to think about survival, but the role of HP extends beyond merely surviving your battles. It's now a factor in determining what kinds of drops you get from defeating enemies. Some enemies will now drop chips in different codes based on a combination of your busting level and your HP percentage. There are 3 HP ranges that are relevant here, which can simply be categorized as high range, mid-range, and low range. High range is 75% of max HP or above. Low range is 25% or below, which is made extra obvious by the game since you will see your HP displayed in red anytime you're in this range, and will also hear a warning sound effect that plays during battle. Everything else between 25% and 75% HP is mid-range. You would think that the best codes are always going to require a higher HP range, but that doesn't always turn out to be the case. This virus over here, called Handy, drops the Time Bomb 1 battle chip in its best code, the G code, in the low HP range. People in the know will tell you that G is a good code because it fits nicely into decks based around Gutsman and Gateman, two Navis whose battle chips enable some of the most powerful combos in the game. It's also a code that you can get for Time Bomb 2 and Time Bomb 3, allowing you to select all three of them, in order of weakest to strongest, to form the Time Bomb Plus, a delayed screen nuke that does 500 damage. Going back to this information on the Handy virus, we see that getting Time Bomb 1 in G-code requires player HP to be in the low range. If that condition is met, then you get a 3.125% chance of it dropping at busting level 9, 25% at busting level 10, and 50% at busting level S. This is all assuming, of course, that there aren't any chips from other viruses in the encounter, which would make the pool a little more crowded and cut your actual chances to half or even a third of what's being shown here. For those who remember the rules for determining busting level and are now puzzled at how you're supposed to get an S rank with low HP, remember that you can deliberately let enemies attack you prior to your battle with the Handy virus. Then, when you fight Handy, you go into it with your HP already in low range, which means you no longer have to risk lowering your busting level by taking hits. You can go for that quick multi-delete, and after about half a dozen tries, the chip will be yours. Here's another case where you may want to pay attention to your HP range when farming chips: the Canodum virus. This virus was in the previous game and only dropped the Cannon battle chip in codes A, B, and D from virus battles. If you wanted to get codes C and E to enable the Zeta Cannon or Omega Cannon combos, you needed to either unlock parts of the net which had a chance of spawning them as mystery data, or buy them from shops for more than I think they're worth. Battle Network 2 allows Canodums to drop all 5 codes, and all you need to do is pay attention to your HP when farming for them. You can read through this list on your own, but I want to call your attention to something interesting here. Notice that the E code is listed twice, one for the 7 to 10 busting level range, and another for the 5 to 7 range. You can take advantage of this. If you're having trouble getting a higher busting level, you can try aiming for the lower 5 to 7 busting level range by making sure to be in the low HP range. This could be helpful in the early hours of the game when you don't have a lot of strong chips yet. While this might not be a big deal for mere Canodums, you might find yourself interested in a chip from a stronger virus later in the game, and HP management might just be the answer if you find yourself struggling to get the chip otherwise. There is one last thing to watch out for when it comes to your HP range, and that's the possibility of getting a recovery drop. When you're in the low, or sometimes even mid-HP ranges, some viruses, but not all, may have a chance to drop HP recovery as a reward instead of Zenny or chips. This can even be a full recovery at times, though you often have to earn the max recovery by getting a good busting level. This gives you some hope of survival in the event that you didn't have any recovery options ready when entering an area with dangerous viruses. But there's also a downside to this. Sometimes, when you're trying to farm a chip that requires a lower HP range, you risk getting a free recovery to drop instead of the chip you're actually going after. On top of crowding out the pool of possible drops from the battle, and lowering your chances of getting what you want, getting a recovery drop could mean wasting time having to bring your HP back down before you try again for that chip. There are 2 rules of thumb for minimizing this problem. One is to skip any battles that don't contain your target virus. This also applies to the battle that you use to bring down your HP in the first place. Once you bring your HP down to the level you want, don't finish off the viruses. Just run from the battle. That way you have 0 chance of getting a free recovery. The second rule of thumb is simple but easy to forget. Save your game. Then you can just reload your save file and try again without having to repeat the process. A bonus rule of thumb, if you can stomach it, is to hold off on Mega Man's health upgrades. It's quicker and easier to get into the low HP range when your max health isn't that high to begin with. Perhaps the speedrunners take advantage of this strategy, but for normal play, I'd compromise by saying that you should still pick up your HP upgrades, but try to farm viruses as you meet them, instead of waiting until the very end of the game to do all your farming. It's now time to talk about program advances. For newcomers, these are the chip combos I was talking about earlier. They follow the same rules as they did in the previous game. Either 3 or 5 identical chips selected with their chip codes in consecutive alphabetical order, i.e. no skipping letters, or 3 to 5 non-identical chips of the same code, typically being part of the same series of battle chips in order from weakest to strongest. One nice thing that this game does for you is that it now keeps a record of program advances that you've used in the PA memo section of the chip library, which you can access from the main menu. If there is more than one way to perform the same program advance, the PA memo will reveal all possible combinations as soon as you use one of them. But the best thing Battle Network 2 did for program advances is making their effects far more interesting. I mentioned in the Battle Network 1 review that the program advance for Sword, Wide Sword, and Longsword was underwhelming, and that all future games make it better. Behold, the replacement for Battle Network 1's Beta Sword, the all-powerful Life Sword. Ooh, do it again! That's 400 damage, and look at the range on it! It hits 6 panels! Steal just one panel from your opponent's field, and they'll have nowhere to run. This is what the game needed. If Battle Network 1 had this from the start, I would have cared more about program advances in that game. Some of these moves are just plain busted, which explains some of the adjustments that were made to the difficulty of this game, but also makes things more fun once you know what you're doing. It should be noted that, since the beta program advances from the previous game are gone, it naturally follows that the Sigma program advances are also gone. If you try to do the previous game's Sigma Sword, for example, the game will just pick out the 3 chips needed for the Life Sword and leave the rest to be used as normal chips. As for the Zeta and Omega program advances, which are activated by picking 3 or 5 chips, respectively, in consecutive alphabetical order, they remain the same by simply granting you a few seconds of invincibility while letting you spam the chip they were based on for as long as the invincibility is active. Not particularly exciting, but they can have their uses. If nothing else, the invincibility alone might be useful in a pinch, and you don't have to wait as long for them to be available anymore, as you can typically farm all the chip codes needed through HP management. The existence of some of those chips in Star Code adds even more accessibility. You can now complete Zeta and Omega program advances by including a Star Code chip, which can replace one, and only one, of the letter codes needed. If you have something like Raton 1 in H and I code, but you don't have it in J code, you can use a Raton 1 with a Star code as a replacement. You can't, however, do something like using 2 Raton 1s in Star code. For program advances that use non-identical chips, this is never a concern. The Gator program advance can be done with 2 of the required chips in Star code, or even all of them, because it's actually possible to get version 1 Navi chips in Star code through chip traders. But even the flexibility offered by Star codes pales in comparison to what you can do once you get just enough regular memory. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most powerful things you can do to pull out your program advances fast is shown right here. If I want a high chance to bring out my Life Sword, I could stuff my folder with swords, wide swords, and long swords while waiting for them to turn up in battle, but I can do way better than that. why not skip some of the waiting time by guaranteeing one of the 3 chips I need on turn 1? Then I'd only have to wait for 2 other chips to complete my combo. Setting sword as my regular chip and putting as many wide swords and long swords as I could into my chip folder is an excellent strategy. This strategy is so effective that I would regularly, pun intended, get my life sword on turn 1, which made for some easy early game chip farming, leading to even more power. This is only one clever use of the regular chip system. Another good one that worked for me at the very beginning was setting attack plus 10 as my regular. After getting my first few copies of the dash attack chip, I had the ability to deal 100 damage in a single hit, which allowed me to more easily farm some bulky early game viruses at a time when all I had to work with was a bunch of early game chips. Even outside of that specific case, using any star code chip as your regular chip has the benefit of always being able to select it with at least one other chip on the first turn, further allowing you to pull at least 2 new chips on your second turn, increasing the chances that you'll get what you need earlier in the battle. And of course, there are times where it may be best not to set a regular chip at all. Think about it. By locking one of the first 5 chips you see in battle to be one specific chip, there are only 4 slots left for everything else in your folder. If I'm fishing for a program advance where I don't have enough regular memory to guarantee any of its required chips, setting my regular chip to something like an attack plus 10 makes it less likely to show up on my first turn. Unless my strategy is to make a lot of first turn selections in order to cycle through my chips quickly, or I'm trying to maximize my usage of the add function early on in the fight, this might not always be the best move. For a Navi battle where you have some leeway to take multiple turns, it can work out in your favor, but if you're trying to S-rank a virus battle, you need to get the right chips on turn 1. Maybe turn 2 if you can pull off a triple delete. Even when you can afford to set your regular chip to something needed for a program advance, it can work against you if you have a folder that has several copies of that chip. You could get situations like this, where I got 2 big bombs and 2 little bombs, but no cross bombs. If I didn't have this big bomb as a regular, that would have at least given me one extra chance to maybe draw the cross bomb I needed to complete the Ultra Bomb program advance. Finally, and this is a minor one, regular chips can help a little bit with chip testing. As I mentioned in the previous game's review, the Battle Network series doesn't always have the clearest chip descriptions, so trying them out and making your own observations will be important. If you get a new chip and just so happen to have enough regular memory for it, why not set it as a regular for a few battles? You'd get plenty of opportunities to try it out that way, and you wouldn't have to waste time waiting for it to show up in your hand. You may have noticed that Mega Man looked a little different in some of those examples I just had on screen. Well, let's talk about that. This game expands on the elemental system introduced by its predecessor in 2 ways. The first change players will notice is that the game has some new panel types that weren't in the previous game, like these grass panels, which will cause anyone standing on them to take double damage from fire-based attacks, while also burning away the grass. Shortly after you come across your first grass panels, the story has you seeking out a program that Lan's dad needs in order to upgrade Mega Man's abilities. While you try to get this program, a crisis immediately unfolds. A mandatory battle on the regular net ensues, you go back to Lan's dad after taking care of it, and you then get told to help in defending the special network that the villains are targeting. Once in this special network, you get to see the effect of Mega Man's upgrade during a scripted event that takes place as soon as you complete one virus battle there. Introducing the style change. Mega Man now has the ability to change his element and his battle style. There are 4 elements and 4 styles that you can get in the main story, which can be mixed and matched in any combination. The elements you get are completely random, and each has a unique charge attack associated with it, which improves when a style levels up through repeated use in a certain number of battles. The fire element gives you a firearm, which attacks the 3 panels ahead of Mega Man and lingers for a bit. The wood element gives you a twister, which hits multiple times and can deal a good chunk of damage if you can work around the fact that it only targets a single panel 2 spaces ahead of Mega Man. The aqua element gives you a bubbler, which has passable damage but can hit 2 enemies at a time if they're lined up one behind the other. And finally, the elec element gives you a zap ring, which has very low damage but can temporarily stun enemies, with the stun lasting longer as the style levels up. Any one of these random elements comes with one of 4 non-random styles that depend on how you play the game. If you tend to ignore battle chips and use the Mega Buster a lot, you will most likely get the Guts style, which doubles your Buster's attack power and gives you super armor, but sets your Buster speed to 1 until you switch to a non-Guts style. If you build your folder with chip codes in mind and use a lot of chips per turn, trigger a lot of program advances, or use the add function a lot, you'll get the custom style, which allows you to utilize your custom window even further by giving you 2 extra slots for chip selection from the start of every battle. If you focus on survivability by utilizing protective chips like guard and barrier, or recovery chips, then you'll probably end up with the shield style, which lets you start every battle with a free barrier by default, and also gives you the ability to activate a shield by pressing the backward direction and the Mega Buster button at the same time. If you rely heavily on Navi chips, you could get the team style, which increases the number of Navi chips you can have in your chip folder by 3, allowing for a total of 8. The game tracks your behavior across all of your battles to determine which combat strategy you lean towards most. You will be offered a new style change every time you complete 280 battles since your last style was obtained, with the exception of the scripted one that you get regardless of how many battles you've done by that point in the story. Any battle that ends with a reward screen counts towards the total, but battles without a reward screen, like the final boss and certain other story battles, will not count. For all the battles that do count, you will always earn 1 point towards at least one of the 4 styles. There are 2 scoring systems at play here, one that updates between battles and one that updates within a battle. Within a battle, the game scores your actions during the encounter to determine which style will get the point after the battle is over. If you, for example, complete a battle by selecting and using 4 chips in one turn, and one of them is a recovery chip that you use after taking a hit, the game will calculate a score in the background for the custom style and the shield style. It'll decide that you scored 50 action points in custom style combat and 45 action points in shield style combat, and the custom style will ultimately get the style point for that encounter. If you did the same thing again, but without taking a hit, your shield score would go up by 5 action points, resulting in a tie, which would cause the game to give 1 style point to each of the 2 styles for that encounter. Once you reach the 280 encounters needed, the game checks which style came out on top for the majority of those 280 encounters. Maybe you end up with something like 20 points towards Guts style, 10 points towards Team style, 100 points towards Shield style, and 150 towards Custom style, in which case the Custom style comes out as the winner. If 2 or more styles have the same amount of style points by the time you're offered a new style, the game will break the tie by prioritizing Shield style, then Team style, then Custom style, then Guts style, So if it's a tie between a team style and a gut style, you're getting a team style. I can see team style taking a higher priority since people tend to finish battles without needing to use more than 1 or 2 Navi chips, and may never come across it naturally as a result. But if that's the case, you'd think they would have given it even higher priority than shield style, as there are plenty of people who would adopt a more defensive playstyle, or even just be bad at dodging and need to use a lot of recovery to compensate. I think custom and gut style are fine being at the lower priority since one is really more of a reward for good deck building, and the other gives some fighting chance to those who can't or won't build good decks. In the end, we have the internet, and everyone can pursue the exact style they want by following the information in wikis and guides, though you may need multiple tries if you're particular about the element you want to have. Unlike the elemental armor in the previous game, the element of Mega Man's style change will not reduce the amount of damage you take. It will, however, leave you vulnerable to certain enemies that have your elemental weakness. If you're using a fire style, or heat style as the game likes to call it, you take double damage from aqua-based attacks. The good news here is that you can always switch back to Mega Man's neutral style if you're stuck having to fight an enemy that keeps exploiting your elemental weakness, and if you complete enough battles, you will eventually get a second style change to keep along with your first one, so you can swap styles and elements between the two as needed. There is a chance that both of your saved style changes end up being the same element, and you could also end up with 2 elements of the same style, but you'll be able to discard one of your 2 saved styles the next time you're offered a style change, so you don't have to worry about permanently ruining your save file if you don't get exactly what you want in those first 2 attempts. If you're still not sure which elements to prioritize based on the types of charge attacks they do and the elemental weaknesses they have to deal with, then you may want to consider their interactions with certain environments and panel types. In addition to the normal, cracked, and broken panels from the previous game, Battle Network 2 introduces new panel types as well as varying battle environments that increase the need for strategy. Before you even acquire your first style change, you will encounter battles where panels are already cracked, battles with empty panels, and battles with environmental obstacles and hazards like rocks and explosives. Sometimes the viruses you fight in these battles will be well suited to these battlefields, like this fishy virus being able to take advantage of your inability to hover over these empty panels. Or this shrimpy virus being able to reach you from behind this rock if you try to use it to hide from the Shell Geek's needles. Other times, you can leverage the environment to give yourself an advantage, such as opening the cracked panels here to block this Meteor's attacks, or wrecking these viruses by activating the bomb that was conveniently placed on their side of the field. As you get further into the game, you'll come across more new panel types. I already mentioned how grass panels can double the damage of fire attacks, but they also allow wood-type Navis and viruses to gradually recover health while standing on them. If you have a wood style, you can take advantage of this too. Just try not to get hit by fire when standing on a grass panel, because you'll take double damage from being weak to fire, and that damage doubles again for being on a grass panel, resulting in the total damage being quadruple what it would normally be. We also have lava panels, which will do 50 damage to whoever steps on them, or 100 if they happen to be of the wood element, before disappearing. That's right, the floor is literally lava. Fire Navis and fire viruses are immune to lava panels, and you can remove lava panels safely by hitting them with aqua-based attacks, summoning an object onto them, or stepping on them while protected by something like a barrier. You can also trick viruses into stepping on them. Then we have the ice panels. You and your enemies will slip on these, causing a step in any direction to take you all the way in that direction until you hit an obstacle, or the last panel in that direction that you're able to step on. Now, you might be thinking that Aqua Navis and viruses have some sort of advantage on ice panels. Nope! Ice panels double the damage received from any elect-based attack, and if your element is Aqua, that's quadruple damage you're taking. Get wrecked, Freeze Man! And goodbye, Mega Man. The next game will address this situation, but for Battle Network 2, unless you really value the bubble or charge attack, please don't choose Aqua Styles if you have other options. Next up, we have magnet panels. These are slightly less terrible than ice panels. If you stand next to one, it pulls you in unless you're already on a magnet panel or you're standing between two magnet panels. You can get rid of them by cracking them if you don't mind having your field soon being filled with holes. Otherwise, you'll want to use field-altering chips. You'd think the relationship between electricity and magnetism would imply some sort of advantage for using an elect style around these panels, but sadly, there's no advantage to be had here. That leaves us with two more panel types. These purple panels are poison panels, also referred to as swamp panels. They do the exact opposite of what grass panels do to wood element navis and viruses. They drain the HP of whoever stands on them. Just like with magnet panels, you can only get rid of them by cracking them or using field-altering chips. And finally, we have holy panels. Standing on these will cut all damage received in half. The bad news is that the enemies can take advantage of them too. You need to crack them or use a field-altering chip to get them off of the enemy side of the field, but beware of accidentally getting rid of the ones on your side of the field if you plan on using them. They combine well with the aura chips because they effectively double the damage threshold required for the aura to be removed. Now that we've covered everything players need to know about combat, let's dig deeper into those sub-chips I mentioned before. From Battle Network 2 onward, players can access a new menu item that lets them use consumables outside of battle that are referred to as sub-chips. There are 6 kinds of sub-chips. The first 2 are Mini Energy, which allows you to recover 50 HP, and Full Energy, which recovers Mega Man to his maximum HP. The other 4 are Sneak Run, Loc Enemy, Unlocker, and Untrap. Sneak Run allows Mega Man to travel through the net without facing random encounters. It only works on enemies that are weaker than Mega Man, and this is based on Mega Man's current max HP. To test whether you have enough max HP, try getting into a random encounter and see if you can successfully run from it on the first try. If you can do this consistently, Sneak Run will be effective against that encounter. If you sometimes fail in running from an encounter, then Sneak Run will be less effective. Once activated, it will remain active for a certain number of steps, and persists even when Mega Man goes through screen transitions. It automatically gets disabled if Mega Man gets jacked out of the network. One interesting use for Sneak Run is Ghost Navi hunting. I explained Ghost Navis in my review of the previous game, but here's a quick recap on that. When criminal Navis are defeated, they later become available to find in a specific part of the net as ghost data. The first encounter with a Navi ghost will be at a fixed location, and once that version of the Navi is defeated, a stronger version of that Navi permanently becomes available as a random encounter. The previous game made that stronger encounter immediately available to you, but from now on, you have to jack Mega Man out of the net, and then the random ghost encounter will be available starting from the next time you visit. I guess they didn't want you to barely defeat Airman version 2, only to be immediately ambushed and deleted by Airman version 3 after taking just a few steps. Anyway, this random encounter with a Ghost Navi is certainly stronger than a random encounter with the virus of that area, so you could find yourself in the position where Sneak Run prevents the encounters with the viruses and leaves only the Ghost Navi as a possible encounter, which would certainly make them easier to find if you want to try and get their battle chips. but since it's possible to escape from Ghost Navi encounters, some of the weaker, early-game Navis will get filtered by Sneak Run once Mega Man is powerful enough, and you'll have to find them through sheer luck after that point. So if you don't have the patience for that, maybe don't wait too long to hunt those Navis. The Loc Enemy subchip can also help here. Loc Enemy, which I believe is an abbreviation for Locate Enemy, though you could argue it's an abbreviation for Lock Enemy, is a subchip that increases the chance of repeating the last encounter you had. If you were tracking down a Ghost Navi and defeated them, but only got Zenny out of them instead of their chip, you can activate Loc Enemy and have an increased chance of them being among your next few encounters, so you can try them again for another chance at getting their chips. Even with Loc Enemy, you still have a chance of getting other encounters, though you can get around that by using Sneak Run if the encounter you're targeting is strong enough to not be affected by that. Loc Enemy is similar to Sneak Run in that its effect persists for a certain number of steps. This means that it can last for several encounters before it expires, allowing you multiple chances to repeat the targeted encounter. Unlike Sneak Run though, it will automatically expire if Mega Man screen transitions to another area. This makes sense because if you target an encounter in one area, then it simply won't exist in another area because each area has a unique set of encounters. Even if the same enemies exist in more than one area, their arrangement or perhaps even their battle environments may be different, so they can't really be counted as the same exact encounter you targeted from some other area. If you know what you're doing, you shouldn't have to worry about your Loc Enemy expiring from a change of location. What you should worry about is having it expire before you were lucky enough to get the opponent you targeted. It's possible through sheer bad luck to just keep getting different enemies to show up after you use your Loc Enemy, as it doesn't guarantee the encounter you've targeted. But there's a really easy way to get around this. Reload your save file. Use the subchip, save, run around randomly, and if you don't get what you want, just reload. Loc Enemy will still be active, and the best part is that you can find your target, get their chip, and save again, and Loc Enemy will still be active in case you want to get multiple chips from them. As long as you haven't used up all your steps, you can milk this subchip for all it's worth, and that's an especially good idea in the early game because these things are expensive. Towards the end of the game, you'll have an easier way to get money for this subchip, so try to use it sparingly until then. Once you can comfortably afford Loc Enemy, you'll be in a position to use it for more than just Ghost Navis. Some viruses in this world are quite rare, and you might spend an agonizing amount of time trying to find them, only to fail at getting their chip. Loc Enemy works on viruses too. You only need to find that rare encounter once, then target it with Loc Enemy, and use the save and reload trick until you can get that high busting level and the chip that you need to finish your collection. Next up is the Unlocker subchip. This one is straightforward. Mystery data from Battle Network 2 onward is now color-coded, and Unlocker is needed for mystery data of a certain color. The colors were meaningless in the previous game, but now we have 3 different levels of importance to mystery data. Green mystery data is the type that will respawn after you leave and re-enter a network. It will drop a random item from a pool of battle chips or Zenny rewards, depending on the specific region of the net where it was found. You can save the game before grabbing it and reload the file to re-roll it until you get what you want from it, though in order to change the contents, you will have to make a few random movements first because of the way the RNG works. Blue mystery data comes next, and this one is a fixed reward. It can be found on roads of bigger networks or in isolated networks that you access from jacking into random things like coffee machines, refrigerators, and so on. Blue mystery data can give you a battle chip, some Zenny, a free sub-chip, a key item needed to progress in certain networks, a bug frag, or an upgrade for Mega Man, which can be an HP memory to increase your max HP, a reg up to increase your regular memory, a sub-memory to increase the maximum number of sub-chips you can carry, or a power-up for the Mega Buster, for which I still have the same recommendation as I did in Battle Network 1. Use your first power-up, on charge, to unlock charge attacks, which will do a pitiful 5 times the damage of a normal shot with basic Mega Man, and a preset amount of damage based on your element and style level when using a style change, which is where the real power of charge attacks will be seen in this game. Getting back to the topic of Blue Mystery Data, once you pick it up, you can't claim it again unless you start a new game. The same goes for Purple Mystery Data. Purple Mystery Data can drop the same kinds of things you'd expect from Blue Mystery Data, but the content is typically very rare and valuable, and you'll be prompted to use the Unlocker subchip in order to access it. It's always a good idea to have some Unlocker subchips on hand once you can afford them, so you can have it ready to use if you encounter some Purple Mystery Data and don't want to be stuck having to take a second trip for it after the fact. You will occasionally get an Unlocker for free from Blue Mystery Data, so I wouldn't recommend stocking up on too many Unlockers, and you will eventually find all the Purple Mystery Data in the game, so this subchip will become obsolete once you get far enough into the game. The last subchip you will encounter becomes available very late into the game's story, and that is the Untrap. Just like Unlocker, this is a subchip that works on mystery data, but specifically on green mystery data. In the more dangerous parts of the net, green mystery data now has a chance of being booby-trapped with a virus. The virus you encounter will be selected from the random battles available in the area where you picked up the mystery data, and it can't be avoided by the effects of Sneak Run if you happen to have it active when collecting said mystery data. One way to get around this is by saving in front of the mystery data and reloading, as mentioned before. Some areas have mystery data with such a high chance of having a virus that even this can become tedious, so the intended solution is to use the Untrap subchip in these scenarios. You can then combine this with the trick of reloading your save file for what will hopefully be a quicker way to get the item you want from that mystery data's drop pool. The good news about Untrap is that it has no step count limit, nor does it expire when transitioning between different areas on the net. If you use it once, it will work on every single green mystery data crystal you come across until you leave the net entirely. And it's really cheap too. The only downside is getting to the one and only place in the entire game that sells it, as even the shortest route to get there can get tiresome rather quickly. But that's all the subchips. You start the game being able to carry up to 4 of each, and if you do enough exploring and side content, you'll be able to carry 8 of everything by the end. Keep a few of each on hand for whenever you may need them, and you should have a smoother experience when playing. It's about time we talk about the net itself. You've probably noticed already from the footage you've been seeing up to this point, but the net looks a lot better than it did in the previous game. You can still look at online maps made by the fandom for extra comfort, but they're nowhere near as necessary as they were for the previous game. Gone are the days of traveling through area after area with the same background and color scheme everywhere you go, and winding through dizzying, crisscrossing roads that all look the same, as the net now has more color and landmarks, and even an intuitive naming system for each location and sublocation. Anytime you want to know where you are, just open the pause menu and the game will tell you in the bottom right corner. The name of the area is always there. This even works in the real world, making it possible for guides to tell you where to go with more precision. Areas in the net are named after the physical locations in the real world that correspond to them, followed by a simple number. These areas usually come in groups of 3 or 4, and all areas from the same group will have their own layouts and color schemes, distinguishing them even further. Every one of these groups now includes a virus-free zone for Navis to gather, which is known as the Square, because it's like a town square for Navis. In the square, you'll find shops that sell battle chips or sub-chips, and you'll also find one or more message boards that update as you progress through the game's story. It's like Twitter, minus the toxicity. Apart from NPC comments about events occurring in the game's story, these message boards extend the game's tutorial by discussing game mechanics, strategies for fighting certain viruses, information about specific battle chips, and occasional hints for program advances, so it's a good idea to check them regularly. In addition to the boards and shops, one square in particular has a special shop that doesn't accept payment in Zenny. Instead, this shop wants you to purchase chips using the new secondary currency known as Bug Frags. Bug Frags are a permanent addition to the series, but in this game, there's a fixed amount of them, and once you find them all, you'll have just enough to buy all the items in this Bug Frag shop. To find them, you need to look for blue mystery data hidden in specific locations on the net. You probably won't even see them most of the time, as they tend to be obscured by objects in the foreground, hidden behind ramps or under bridges. Sometimes you'll run into them by accident because Mega Man will be moving through the net and suddenly stop as if he got stuck on something while you're still holding a direction for him to move. Other times you might notice the mystery data because the particle effect coming off of it will be just barely visible. Either way, you grab it the same way you grab any ordinary mystery data, and it will be added to your key items, where you can go to check how many you have at any given time. One last improvement to the general net is the way you access the computers of people you meet in the game. In the prequel, you had to get their link code and then find a terminal in the net to open it from the outside before you could start using that person's home machine as an access point. From now on, these characters will instead have security cubes, which sit just outside the exit points of their home machines, allowing you to open them from the outside or the inside. This means that you can start using that character's device as a shortcut immediately after receiving the passcode to unlock their security cube. A small but significant improvement. The game even makes you open a security cube from the inside at one point in the story to ensure players know that this is a possibility. In addition to security cubes protecting the devices of specific characters, you'll find security cubes that require you to have other special codes. Some of these codes can only be obtained through completing side content, while others are tied to your City NetBattler license level. The plot of Battle Network 2 has Lan and friends signing up to become City NetBattlers, which helps ensure that Lan has something to do during his summer break whenever his friends are busy. You will typically be asked to perform some sort of task, like rescuing a lost Navi, followed or sometimes even preceded by a test known as a survival battle, where you fight several virus encounters in a row with no breaks in between to show that you're strong enough to help the authorities in fighting certain levels of crime. As you rank up, you gain access to more areas of the net and unlock more tasks that you can complete for rewards, known as jobs, and posted on this jobs board that can be found in the physical world's official center, the headquarters of the world's law enforcement, basically. The jobs board will update as you progress through the game's story, and while some tasks are mandatory, the majority are optional content, though it's in your best interest to complete them because the rewards will include things like upgrades for Mega Man, large sums of cash, key items like the code for unlocking a certain group of security cubes, and special battle chips that can only be obtained once per game and might be necessary for completing certain program advances. Some of these jobs are as simple as giving someone a battle chip they want. Others will have you searching for a missing person or Navi. And others still will challenge you to a series of battles or ask you to track down delinquents. And for added realism, some of these jobs are fake ones posted by criminals who want to ambush you. Because when you have a system that lets anyone post a job and specify whatever meeting place they want the responding party to go to, Of course the criminals are going to abuse that. Unfortunately for them, you're Lan and Mega Man, so you won't be trapped in there with them. They will be trapped in there with you.
Mess with the best and you lose like the rest.
They usually leave behind something of value, probably obtained through black markets or other shady sources, so you still get some kind of reward from completing these fake jobs. The general advice is to take every job, but be careful about choosing jobs that require you to bring a specific chip, because if you don't have the chip to give them, you'll be stuck. The game won't let you start a new job until the current one is complete. A good rule of thumb is to save before you accept a job, go to the meeting spot to find out more about what the job entails, and then reload the save file if you find yourself unable to complete it at that moment in time. That way, you'll still be free to pick a different job instead. And that's pretty much it for the job system. Now let's talk about changes to battle chips and how to get them. The previous game had a smaller total number of battle chips and left a lot to be desired when it came to the availability of elemental chips. Battle Network 2 has a total of 250 chips to collect through normal gameplay, plus some downloadable chips you can get once per save file in the Legacy Collection by accessing the download screen from the Mega Man status menu, and some additional secret chips that can be obtained by random chance through battling other players. Compare this to Battle Network 1 having a total of 175 chips, plus a single downloadable chip, and it becomes clear that they got creative between developing the first and second games. While some chips from the previous game have come back, sometimes with slight alterations to how they work or how much damage they do, there's a good number of chips from the previous game that have been phased out, so the number of new chips here is more than just the difference in the sizes of the chip libraries between the two games. The number of chips for each element is now a little bit more balanced, but the wood element is still lacking some offensive options because 3 of the chips added to the list in this game have a restriction that requires grass panels to be present in order for them to work at all, which discourages their use, but at least we have more offensive options for this element, so they definitely noticed the issue from the previous game. As for changes to the effects of chips, there are quite a few. Some returning chips from the previous game have simply had their attack power changed, like the series of cannon battle chips. Some have received changes to their names, like Met Guard changing to just Guard, or Dash being changed to Dash Attack. In addition to the name change, Met Guard has a new feature. In the previous game, it would simply block an attack, but the newer version, upon blocking an attack, also sends back a shockwave that deals 40 damage. Rock Cube has also changed from summoning 3 rocks in random positions to summoning 1 rock in front of Mega Man, and it has an interesting interaction with certain other chips. Recovery chips, and chips that provide barriers, now activate instantly without having to dim and pause the screen as they take effect. There has been a reduction in the attack delay that followed the use of several chips from before, making it easier to use battle chips in quick succession. With new types of panels come new chips that transform panels into a desired type. And for those who love their fighting game combos, there are some new chips that require you to input button commands in order to get different effects from them. When it comes to acquiring chips, we have the aforementioned changes to the available codes that drop from viruses based on your HP percentage, but there's also been an improvement to the rate of power creep. Your ability to access a lot of power very early in the game has been significantly reduced, as the game restricts your access to areas with stronger viruses based on story progression. This means you can't breeze your way through the big early game fights anymore, and you'll become acutely aware of this increase in difficulty compared to the previous game as a result, especially if you try to collect Navi chips or pursue post-game content. The weaker versions of chips that come in a series will see some use now because it'll be a while before you get the stronger versions of those chips. Not even the chip trader machines will save you here, because there have been some changes to them too. The first major change is that the game will auto-save whenever you use them, so you can't just reload your file until you get something you like anymore. The machines are also released in stages now, where you first get access to the 3-chip trader, which has a lower chance of dropping rare chips in exchange for 3 of your own, and then you gradually get introduced to multiple 10-chip traders, which take 10 of your chips for a chance at a chip of higher rarity. These 10-chip traders actually have separate drop pools, so unless the rare chip you want from them is something already in your possession, it might never show up at all if it's not on that specific machine's list of possible drops. The later the machine is introduced, the newer the chips that can be found in its drop pool, delaying your access to late-game and post-game chips. The upside to this is that you can now target the chips you want a little bit better by simply picking the right machine. Smaller pools separated across multiple machines means higher chances of getting a specific chip you want from one of those smaller pools. One final change to the chip traders is some quality of life, where they automatically show your chips sorted by quantity, as most people tend to throw away the chips that they have too many copies of anyway when using the chip traders. This can come back to bite you if you like to stock up on a higher quantity of some of your favorite chips, which you might find yourself doing if you want to have enough of them to fill multiple chip folders, because that is something that this game does now. After completing a certain challenge, you will receive a second chip folder, allowing you to build different folders for different situations and simply switch between them instead of having to edit the chips in your current folder every time you need a change of strategy. You'll get even more flexibility towards the end of the game if you satisfy the request of a certain NPC who will reward you with a third folder. Since you can have up to 5 copies of a chip in a single folder, with 3 folders you might see yourself collecting as many as 15 copies of a chip you really like, just so you can have it in all of your folders if need be. And when they're not in a folder, those chips will show up around the top of the list when using a chip trader, so you'll have to be careful to skip over them when choosing chips to throw away. What about RNG manipulation? Is that still an option to help with getting chips? Yes, but it's gotten harder, to the point where I didn't realize it was still possible until a certain grinding session caused me to notice a pattern. There are 3 main stages when it comes to manipulating battles here: locking in the specific encounter you want, controlling the chips that appear in your starting hand, and ultimately trying to get the exact reward that you want to drop at the end of the battle. That first part of the process has changed in a significant way since the previous game. Previously, if you saved your game while inside of a network, then reloaded the game and held a direction from the moment you pressed continue, you'd keep getting that same exact virus encounter with the same exact starting hand, as long as you kept repeating this process of reloading while holding a direction. The only way to change the encounter would be to change directions while moving, switch from running to walking or vice versa, or take a few steps and save the game again so you had a new reload point. Repeat this process a few times until you get the encounter you want and you have it locked in, free to do it over as many times as it takes to get the chip. As long as you didn't move from that position, you could even open and edit your chip folder and save the game again and reload, and the same encounter would be there, with your starting hand possibly replaced if the chips in that hand were replaced during your folder editing. Here, I attempted to replace the Gaia 3s that were showing up in my opening hand in that last battle with Colorman 3s. I successfully guessed 2 out of the 3, and you see them showing up right here. Battle Network 2 throws a wrench in this by allowing time spent on the title screen to count towards changing your RNG. depending on how quickly you press continue after the game boots up, you now get different encounters from this reload and hold a direction process. This initially made me give up on the idea of locking encounters because I thought that I'd have to be precise down to the millisecond to get the same fight consistently. Then I had a few long sessions where I was hunting down a ghost Navi or a rare virus, and out of habit, I started reloading the game as quickly as I could in a bid to get the desired encounters sooner. I sometimes noticed some odd things this way. I would sometimes, by complete accident, follow the exact same path I did in previous reload sessions, getting an encounter at the exact same pixel, and as luck would have it, it would be an encounter I wanted. Over the course of quite literally hundreds of reloads, I would start to notice that while I wasn't always getting the same single encounter, I was getting a distinct set of encounters. Same enemies, same chips, same everything. I was already near done with the game and ready to move on to Battle Network 3 at this point, and it was in Battle Network 3 that my suspicions were confirmed. The timing needed to lock encounters wasn't so precise that it required the type of technology assistance relied upon by speedrunners. If I had to guess, the amount of time spent on the title screen before pressing continue only changes the encounter RNG once every 100 or maybe even 200 milliseconds. That's a tenth to a fifth of a second. That's a big enough window to lock encounters if you press continue as quickly as your fingers will let you. If your reflexes aren't that fast, you could alternatively try waiting for the title screen music to play and time your press of the continue button with a specific note of your own choosing, and so long as you can land on that note consistently, you'd be able to get the same encounter, or maybe a set of 2 or 3 encounters if you sometimes hit it too early or too late. That's what you'll likely see when you first try this, and your first sign that you're understanding the idea behind it. With enough practice, you'll be able to tell before the game even loads whether you've hit the continue button too soon or too late, and save yourself the trouble of even having to check. I'm not that good with musical timing, so I prefer the approach of just hitting continue as soon as the game allows it, but you do whatever works for you. From there, you can perform the folder manipulation mentioned a few minutes ago in this video and described in a little more detail in my review of the previous game, and get your S rank, or whatever rank you happened to be aiming for. That leaves the reward RNG, which still depends on your actions, but, and this is not something I've fully confirmed, it seems to have been tweaked slightly to allow the reward to change with the passage of time, even if you repeat the same exact steps to clear the same locked encounter. If true, the window for this time factor is a bit wide, so it could end up running your battle time over the time limit for your target busting level, which leaves changing your sequence of actions to still be the best option for influencing the reward RNG. Throw in an extra chip you don't need to complete the battle. Tank a hit or two, preferably with a shield or barrier. Or fire a few quick buster shots. Any one of these actions, or perhaps a combination of these actions, could help change the reward that drops from the encounter until you land on the one that you actually want. Even without using any of these RNG manipulation strategies, plain old patience, persistence, strategy, and luck will eventually get you everything in this game. We don't have the notorious problem of getting the drop-down and leaf shield battle chips of Battle Network 1 here, so I'd say these changes to the RNG are a net positive for the series. And with that RNG discussion out of the way, it's finally time to talk about the story and post-game. I'm going to summarize a good chunk of it, so for those of you worried about spoilers, I will have a timestamp in the description to skip ahead of these sections in case you want to hear some final general comments and nitpicks before leaving. For the rest of us, let's get into the story. It's summer vacation! Woohoo! What's there to do? Quite a lot more than the previous game, that's for sure. The main story is longer, and the side content has increased substantially along with it. We start with Lan getting busted for having a bad report card and having to do some summer homework before he meets up with his friends in the new square that has been added to the net. At the square, Lan and friends decide to try becoming city NetBattlers because the authorities seem to be short-staffed these days and need all the help they can get in fighting cybercrime. Upgrading our city NetBattler license and handling requests is a frequent need in this game's story, and will be the go-to activity when Lan's friends are unavailable for more typical summer activities. It even serves as a reason for the authorities to enlist our help in fighting the major threat of this game, a new organization that calls itself Gospel. The leadership of Gospel doesn't mess around, as the game quickly shows you that they're willing to deal with their members if they fail at their task. Their goal, at first glance, is not to steal precious programs like the World 3 sought to do in the previous game, but to commit various acts of cyber terrorism that eventually escalate to real-world consequences. These guys target systems that mitigate natural disasters, and towards the end of the game, we get to see some of the things that happen when these systems fail. This series got dark real fast. The situation with Gospel escalates to a point where every nation in the Battle Network world has a reason to fight back, and after a devastating attack on the cyber square of a nation called Yumland, followed immediately by an attack on the main headquarters of the authorities in Electopia, which is the name of Lan's home country, we are summoned to a meeting of official NetBattlers from around the world, taking place in yet another country called Nitopia. Lan's parents are A-OK with their 11-year-old son traveling by himself to a foreign country for the first time in his life, and so, off we go. I want to cover this part of the story in more detail because there's a lot to unpack here. You get robbed 3 times before the meeting you were called for, and it is beyond frustrating. Getting out of this situation and reclaiming everything that was stolen requires you to first complete a really tough battle, and you'll have nothing but the chips already placed in your folders. All your other chips are temporarily stolen from you, so if you arrive in Nitopia with a folder that's not well suited to that fight, you'll be in for an unpleasant time. One saving grace is that you can grind some new chips in the few networks that are available to you, and can either use those new chips or toss them into the 10-chip trader that can be found at this corner for the chance to get something better suited to the fight. So it's not completely hopeless. With the Legacy Collection, you could always just bulldoze your way through it by enabling Buster Max mode, but that wasn't available in the original version of the game, so it isn't a solution that the developers originally intended for players to use. Once you can clear this hurdle, you'll be able to access Nitopia's public net, where you can start collecting some easy cash and chips through green mystery data, and you'll finally be able to track down and reclaim your stolen belongings before calling it a day and getting ready for the official meeting. The meeting day arrives, and because this game was made long before 2018, our characters didn't realize that an emergency meeting can only mean that there's an imposter among us. Yeesh, the problems just keep piling up. The situation gets resolved, and then it's time for Lan to go back home. At this point, you can get the code for a security cube that lets you freely travel between Nitopia's net and Electopia's net, if you want to access any of the squares or just farm some early game viruses, but otherwise you can just head to the airport. Surely that imposter situation was the end of our problems on this trip, right? Surely we can just go back to finally regain access to a bunch of side quests we haven't been able to do for this whole trip, right? Ha! In your dreams. The plane taking us back just had to get hijacked. You know the routine by now. Find the bad guy and make him pay for prolonging your trip. Lan arrives home after that, and can now travel back and forth by plane whenever he wants, as a reward for rescuing the flight. This isn't necessary for accessing Netopia's public net because, as mentioned before, it now connects to Electopia's net. But it does lead to the hilarious realization that it's often faster to complete certain quests and side quests by taking a whole flight back to Netopia and jacking in from one of the access points over there instead. Before you go to Lan's bed and turn in for the night, you can visit Lan's friends and hand them some souvenirs for some rewards. I didn't have those souvenirs because the guy who sells them only appears on the final day of the Netopia arc of the story, and I never thought to check around for new NPC dialogue before getting onto the plane. The rewards aren't anything too important, so it's fine if you miss them, but I do feel like they should have made that NPC available earlier. You'd think a souvenir seller would be one of the people you see as soon as you arrive in a foreign country, because that's when players would be most likely to talk to everyone and see what they have to say, but I guess they wanted it to be a reward for taking one last look throughout the town before leaving. In all fairness, the game does tell you to get souvenirs in the form of an email from Yai, but you get that email well before the seller is available, so it's easy to forget by the time you're about to leave. Apart from handing in souvenirs, you can complete some side quests from the job board, which have been piling up since you were gone. Either we're the only city NetBattler taking these requests, or the staffing issues at the official HQ are far worse than we thought. To top it off, some of these jobs might be hindered by the new crisis that occurs at this point in the story, where a bunch of ice crystals have appeared all over the net, occasionally blocking off specific paths, or Navis and Frags that you may want to talk to. I think it's the fandom's consensus that this is the worst part of the game. These ice crystals require you to find certain key items and talk to specific characters who can use those key items to create a tool that lets you shatter them, but only if they're a specific color. You have to go through this process multiple times as you try to break ice crystals of different colors during your investigation, and it involves a lot of backtracking. It didn't seem bad enough to ruin the game for me, but I can see it being a worse experience for people who get stuck on some of the game's hints. It's in a competition with the power plant network from the previous game for worst story section in the series, and for me personally, the power plant is worse. That being said, this does highlight the need for more shortcuts to the locations you have to visit frequently throughout the story, and we see some improvements in this regard once we get to the next game. And it would be unfair not to mention that one upside of these crystals is that they typically release a rare virus that you can try to get chips from. Each crystal has a predetermined encounter, so you can save the game in front of the crystal and reload as many times as you like to try and get early access to some rare chips for your collection. Once you defeat the one behind all this, any remaining ice disappears, and you're basically at the final chapter of the main story. Gospel has done so much damage now that natural disasters are happening all over the world. Earthquakes leading to an impending tsunami, intense heat from the sun, and high levels of radiation are all on the table. We track down the location of the Gospel hideout and discover that it's somewhere in Kotobuki, put on some radiation protection, and head out to a new location where the real world and the cyber world seem to be partially merging together. As we make our way through the building where the head of Gospel seems to be hiding, we get our rematches with previous bosses and come to discover that the real goal of Gospel was collecting bug frags to create some sort of super Navi that would destroy the entire net. Remember that one bug frag shop in Kotobuki Square? Yeah, that might have been one of the ways they got the bug frags needed for their Super Navi project. The game doesn't tell you this outright, but it's hard to deny a connection being there. For our final boss, the Super Navi, named Base, is created in our presence, and if you played the post-game of Battle Network 1, you will recognize this Navi. Then you'll ask yourself how this Navi could have existed in the previous game if he was seemingly created during the events of this current game, a question that is addressed later. We defeat him, and he transforms into a creature that kind of looks like a lion, giving us our true final boss fight, and also revealing that the leader of Gospel was... a kid? After invoking the powers of friendship and brotherhood, we save the day, and this kid gets taken into custody. Lan's dad tells us that this troubled kid, who will be identified later in the series by the name Sean, may have been manipulated by someone else working behind the scenes. Credits roll, and at the end of it, we witness a scene with Base roaming around some part of the net we haven't seen before, but he gets taken out after moving just a few steps. And the one who took him out is none other than... Base. His monologue informs us that the other Base he just took out was a copy of him, or at least an attempt at one, and that multiple copies seem to have been made, implying that the one we just faced was also a copy. The original is the one that you find in Battle Network 1's post-game as a secret final boss, and if you did that fight, you would notice a key difference between the fight with the original and the fight with the copy that makes the fight with the copy much easier in comparison. So does this make the post-game of Battle Network 1 canon? If that were the case, I'd think Mega Man would say something about recognizing Base during the fight at Gospel's headquarters, so I'm going to say no. This is further supported by the existence of Shadow Man, who was also a hidden boss from the previous game, yet doesn't get recognized by Mega Man when we face him in this current game. Maybe they didn't want to spoil Battle Network 1's post-game and wrote around that. As for the Battle Network 2 post-game, it is much better. It's not just a few extra boss fights, there's actually a narrative this time. You get insights into what was actually happening behind the scenes during the main story, and you get a whole new area to explore, and boy do I love the music they made for this area. The new area comes with some viruses that you'll need to hunt down in order to finish your collection, which you can't run from, by the way. Sneak Run doesn't work on them, even when Mega Man is at his maximum level, and trying to run from them during battle will result in 2 failed attempts before you can finally get away after the 3rd turn, if you can survive that long. You also won't be able to exit this place on command. You have to walk all the way back to the portal you came in from, so your survival skills will be more important than ever. The mystery data in this area drops some really useful chips, such as the elemental blade chips, which can be used to create the strongest version of the life sword, and the full cust chip, which is simply amazing for cycling through your folder quickly to get some of those S ranks you need for the new Navi battles. Advancing through the area will require you to upgrade your license level even further than you could in the main story. This will help you progress because some paths are blocked off by security cubes that demand a higher license level. But if that weren't enough, there are other paths in this area that are protected by entities known as protectos, a type of security system that can only be disabled by deleting all the towers appearing on the field at once. Otherwise, they'll just keep attacking you until you're deleted. These battles will test your folder building skills, as the solutions often require specific combinations of chips or specific program advances. As for who installed these security systems, a quick look at the background shows a W and a 3, and if you open the pause menu while you're here, the name of the area is World 3 Area. The villains from the previous game have been working on something, and they're determined to keep nosy passers-by out of it. You go through a cycle of entering this World 3 area, defeating one of its bosses, proceeding to the next section only to be locked out by a security cube, and then leaving to get your license upgraded before coming back to explore further. These new bosses have a ridiculous amount of HP, so you'd better come prepared with some hard-hitting combos. Once you've defeated the boss of the last area, you make your way back to the portal in order to exit, only to be ambushed at the last second by the original base. Should you survive this fight, you'll be able to find him as a ghost Navi. At this point, you could call it a day, but there's one last thing you can obtain. There's a girl that can be found at the park in Lan's hometown after clearing the main game. If you talk to her, she will mention a list of Navis. This list keeps track of the Navis who you've S-ranked in their strongest form. Once you've S-ranked all these Navis, except base, if you either have 2 style changes acquired, or 1 style change that has been leveled up at least once, your next style change will be a special style change that will only be offered to you once. If you reject or delete it after the fact, you can never get it again without starting a whole new game. This secret style change is called the Hub Style. It's a non-elemental style that cuts Mega Man's max HP in half while equipped, but gives you the benefits of all 4 of the styles in return. It gives you the super armor and double buster damage from the Guts style, and from the custom style, it gives you 5 extra slots in the chip select screen from the start of every battle. It increases the maximum number of Navi chips you can have in your folder, just like the team style does. And like the shield style, it lets you start every battle with a barrier, while also giving Mega Man the ability to activate a shield by pressing the backward direction and the normal Buster Shot button at the same time. You can bring this in against the final form of base if he's giving you trouble, but it's unlikely that you're having trouble with him if you've already S-ranked all the others, so the main use for this style is challenging other players. When it comes to challenging other players, Battle Network 2 offers a new incentive for you to try the PvP. Even after you've collected every chip in the game, there are actually 10 secret chips that don't appear in the data library until after you've acquired them. The way to get them? Make sure you have at least 3 completion stars, then defeat another player who also has 3 completion stars. If you S-rank that battle, there's a 1 in 16 chance that you'll get one of these secret chips to drop. What on earth is a completion star? In the first game, you got a single yellow star next to the continue option on the title screen after defeating the final boss. This game decided to give you different stars for different completion tasks. You get the yellow star for beating the main story, a green star for defeating the real base in post-game, a red star for collecting 1 of every chip, not including the downloadable chips and the secret chips, a blue star for activating every program advance in the game, and a purple star for collecting the 10 secret chips. That purple star is the only one that requires interaction with another player, and whether you should pursue it depends on how you see the ratio of effort to reward. I already mentioned that you need an S rank against an opponent who also has at least 3 stars, so you can't just hope to be matched against a low-level player that has yet to even clear the main game. Even then, you only get a 1 in 16 chance of getting a secret chip, and even if you get one, there's no guarantee that it'll be one you don't already have. If you have 9 out of the 10, and you just need that last one to drop, you're looking at a 1 out of 10 chance stacked on top of a 1 out of 16 chance, or a combined 1 out of 160 chance of getting the one you need. And they won't drop at all if you decide to play the kind of network battle that doesn't involve risk. If you lose these battles, you stand to lose some of your hard-earned chips, and that's no fun. A lot of players understand the absurdity of all this, so the strategy they follow is to take turns losing to each other on purpose, then trading chips with each other, whether it's to return chips that were taken from the opponent, or to help each other complete the secret chip collection by giving away the duplicate drops. There are some players out there who will just straight up give you the secret chips through trading without you ever having to do a single PvP battle. Those are your options to get the purple star. And what will getting all 5 stars do for you? You get to play the entire game again on hard mode by entering a button combination at the title screen. Enemies have 50% more health and do 50% more damage with a few exceptions, and some of the scripted virus encounters are changed. Complete the story on hard mode, and the next time you load up your save file, you'll find a new chip in your backpack that turns your entire field into holy panels. It may be worth it if you're obsessed with the PvP of Battle Network 2 specifically, but otherwise, I don't think so. Battle Network 3 and 6 tend to be the favorites for PvP, so you'd only be doing all this for your own satisfaction. It's certainly not worth the effort for me, so you'll have to look elsewhere for more information about hard mode. Alright, time for the summary, nitpicks, and anything else of note that I wasn't able to fit into the previous sections of the video. While it's still missing a few things, the gameplay has significantly improved compared to the prequel, and they made all these improvements in less than a year. If I had to guess, they may have already had a lot of those improvements planned during the first game's development, but just didn't have the time to implement those changes until the second game. Every Navi battle, and even a good number of virus battles, have had a lot more thought put into them, making players actually think and strategize until they can get their hands on some of the late-game chips. Assuming they don't bulldoze their way through everything with the Legacy Collection's Buster Max mode, that is. This is especially true for the Navi rematches and the post-game Navi battles. If Battle Network 1 wasn't challenging you enough, then you might find that Battle Network 2 takes a step in the right direction. It also has more story content. Including the post-game content, it took me roughly twice as long to get through Battle Network 2 versus Battle Network 1, and while some of the story sections may have overstayed their welcome by a little bit, I find it hard to argue that any of it was filler. If anything, what slowed down the weaker sections of the story had more to do with game mechanics than the narrative itself, being limited in your options for battle chips in one scenario, and having to take long walks across the net with little in the way of shortcuts in another one. Helping flesh out the story is the added variety in NPC designs and the abundance of little subplots unfolding between the NPCs if you take the time to talk to them regularly, do some of their side quests, and check some of the fluff dialogue they post in the message boards. NPC Navis now have animations and can be seen roaming around on the net instead of just standing in place like some glorified billboard. We got a few more lines for the Navis operated by Lan's friends, giving players a clearer sense of their personalities. We even pay some lip service to physical security measures being taken to prevent people from freely jacking into critical networks, even though the bad guys always manage to get in there anyway. And in spite of the writing getting more serious, the sense of humor established in the previous game is still alive and well here. Getting back to gameplay elements, the changes to the RNG and the addition of HP percentage as a factor in determining battle rewards seems to have made it easier to collect battle chips, at least for those who know what they're doing. I, personally, was no longer faced with scenarios like the infamous Leaf Shield and Drop-Down situation from Battle Network 1. Repeating the same strategy for a battle seemed to give a variety of results over the course of multiple attempts. It no longer felt like I had to manipulate the RNG to get a different result, and I felt like getting the S rank on those tougher battles was truly getting me the chip I wanted about 50% of the time, as promised by the drop rates shown in guides and wikis. It felt so fair that I got through the whole game not realizing that RNG manipulation was still very doable. It was actually a farming session that was several hours into Battle Network 3 that made me realize how the new RNG system worked, after I had a series of repeated encounters that felt too unlikely to be mere coincidence, reminding me of similarly odd farming sessions from Battle Network 2 that had me come back to test out some ideas and discover that manipulation was still possible here, but was now a bit of a time-saving convenience and not a necessity. Along with this improvement to the acquisition of chips was a better management of power creep. The developers definitely noticed the problem I described in my review of Battle Network 1 and made sure to limit the player's access to the better chips until they made more progress in the story, which takes away the reward for taking early risks and venturing where the strongest viruses live, but is probably healthier overall for the average player. Outside of trading with other players, you were no longer getting your hands on something like a cloudier before a cloudy, or mega cannons before high cannons, so you were given the opportunity and the challenge to try making it through whatever point you were at in the game's story using the more basic versions of these chips. Even the chip traders were rolled out in stages, with each of the 10 chip traders having a different drop pool than the others. Over time, this would give you an advantage if you wanted to target a specific chip, but when you first gained access to a 10-chip trader, this served to offer you new stuff while still pacing you so that you couldn't get too strong too quickly. You still had to learn strategy, not just slice through everything with that 200 attack power sword that you got through a lucky trade less than a quarter of the way into the game. Well, at least until you get access to a certain program advance. Outside of such broken combos, a lot of depth has been added to the game's combat. The environment now plays a much bigger role in shaping the outcome of an encounter. Program advances have been revamped and are more accessible. Viruses appear in groups that work really well with each other and/or the environment in which you fight them. The style change system adds the element of, well, elements to the game, and is yet another point of consideration when deciding on your strategy. Your battles with Navis are more complex because a lot of them now carry battle chips of their own that you have to work around. You can't just solve every problem with the Buster anymore, at least not comfortably. You have to think about what you're putting in your chip folders. We start to see in this game the slow emergence of clear subcategories of chips that you can recognize by the way they interact with certain enemies or the environment. We have guarded enemies that take reduced or no damage during their protected phase, unless you use a chip from the breaking subcategory, which not only penetrates enemy defenses, but also destroys objects on the field instantly. The sword subcategory has its importance in facing a new type of enemy that can only be damaged by swords, and lava panels apparently, and can also be useful for eliminating the clones summoned by Shadow Man if you're feeling overwhelmed by them. Swords can also be identified by their interaction with the anti-sword battle chip, which is itself part of a new subcategory of chips that can be classified as traps you can set up for your opponents. If you pay close enough attention, the game even seems to make a distinction between different types of summoned objects, where you can now have up to 2 inanimate objects on the field at the same time, plus 1 active object like a time bomb, wind box, or front sensor. Later games in the series will put even more emphasis on these subcategories. All of this signals to me that the developers really wanted players to care about the deck-building side of the game. Battle Network 2 seems to be clearly designed to make players learn the game at a deeper level. At the cost of feeling more restrictive, it frequently puts your back against the wall in a way that makes you learn to work with the tools that you have, or at least that would be the case if it weren't for the existence of Buster Max mode. But how were the developers supposed to know that such a thing was going to be added to their game 2 decades after development? I still have yet to use Buster Max, and I've already seen the disappointing outcome of letting players use it. It really hurts to see one of your favorite Let's Players cheese their way through any challenge that's presented to them, making it to the end of the game while still having cannons in their folder, all while knowing that they're smart enough to learn and appreciate the depth of the game's systems, but having to instead hear them complain about challenges that they quote-unquote had to use Buster Max to overcome. I was indifferent to Buster Max mode in my previous review, but now I feel like they should have added some restrictions to it, but that should probably be a separate discussion, so I'll drop the subject for now. I'm almost done here, just a few more quick comments and nitpicks. The music. To my ears, it feels much better than before, and I'm not sure how to explain it. It just feels like it's less repetitive, maybe? Like it takes longer before it loops. Just compare these. And even after years away from the game, my mind hasn't forgotten some of my personal favorites, which were the title screen music, the Navi and final boss themes, and the theme for the network leading up to the final boss. Having no idea how to deal with Protectos at the time, I hadn't completed the post-game when I played this game as a kid, and barely remembered anything about the post-game area as a result, so I was pleasantly surprised by the music I heard upon entering the post-game area for what might as well have been the first time. This one has to be my favorite remix of the title screen music in the entire series. The sub-chip system adds some much-needed quality of life to the game. It would have been nice if the game prevented you from buying too many unlockers though, since those become useless once you've opened all the purple mystery data crystals that the game has to offer. It might all just be in my head, but it feels like the encounter rate has been reduced since the previous game. I feel like I'm able to cover a lot of ground between battles. Or maybe I just have a better sense of how far I'm moving through networks because they now have an improved look with landmarks, color, texture, and other details that prevent it all from looking too samey, so I actually know where I am. It's also nice to see that there are now some virus-free zones, namely the squares, where you can take a breather from all the virus busting and focus on other activities. This one is less noticeable, especially to those who aren't trying to collect every chip, but Battle Network 2 starts to introduce a few cases of rare viruses. They've been deliberately made to have a lower encounter rate compared to the other battles available in a given area. Such viruses can teach you that the Loc enemy subchip isn't just for tracking ghost Navis. Once you find your rare encounter, use Loc enemy and save to get as many tries as you need to get their chip. In the next game, you'll have even more cases of rare viruses to deal with, plus a new tool to manipulate their encounter rate. Grammar continues to be a bit all over the place. You can still understand what's being said, but get used to seeing incorrect or missing punctuation, spacing, and spelling. Chip descriptions are still lacking. The suggestion here is the same as last time, and will be the same every time. Test out your chips to see how they work. The addition of the regular chip system should make it easier to do this for most chips. The hints you get from talking to Lan as Mega Man or vice versa can sometimes be obtuse. I felt that the hints were better overall than they were in the previous game, but I can see people having difficulty with some of these, so I'm mentioning it here as a small warning to first-time players. Access to isolated networks has been somewhat restricted. At the start of the game, you come across a few devices that you should be able to jack into, but you're prevented from doing so because the device is turned off, or the jack-in port is messed up in some way. After making a certain amount of progress in the story, they become accessible and you can finally get the goodies inside, but because you come across them so early when they're not accessible, players might forget to try them again later. For example, why would you try jacking into this panel at Lan's house again? You've visited this place so many times that you just assume you already tried it and don't bother with it anymore. Thankfully, the internet exists to remind you that this is a place to find one of your Mega Man upgrades, but good luck to those who want to do it completely blind. There's a good deal of backtracking in this game. You do unlock some shortcuts that let you hop around between different parts of the net, but they arrive a bit too late for my liking. I personally didn't think the backtracking was that egregious, but everyone has their own tolerance level for these things, and for some people, this is such a deal breaker that they'd rather replay the power plant network from the previous game. Either way, you can rest assured that the next game handles shortcuts a lot better. Hunting down bug frags can be a bit of a nuisance at times. There's a limited number of these in the game, and while you will run into a few by coincidence, some of them are a bit too hidden. Even when I thought I was checking under every bridge and ramp, there were still some that I found way later than I could have. Now that the environment plays a bigger role in battles, you need to know the layout of the field when deciding which of your battle chips you want to use. Some environments start you off with the center panel having a hazard or obstacle, in which case the game will have Mega Man start the fight on a different panel. The problem arises when you forget the layout of your side of the field, as it gets covered up by the chip select window. Your only chance to see it is in the first few seconds when the battle loads up. Future games will let you press a button to peek at the field before committing to your chip selections, but for this game, you'll just have to pay attention or look up the layout of the encounter online. The storytelling was already good and got a little better with this entry, but one thing that makes it hard to follow sometimes is the lack of character portraits for scenes occurring between the bad guys. When two or more people talk during such scenes, it can be hard to tell who's actually saying the line displayed on the screen, especially on a first playthrough where you haven't met these characters yet. The game introduces a new type of chip that uses input commands to modify what the chip does. This can pack more options into a single chip, but some of the input commands can be awkward to pull off, especially with how small of a window you have to enter these commands. Giving a longer window of time won't fix things that much because you're basically a sitting duck while entering those commands, and even if you don't get interrupted by the enemy, they might have enough time to move out of your attack's range. Then again, the difficulty of these commands might make it all the more satisfying to those who take the time to master them. The next game will introduce more of these chips, some of which have easier commands to pull off, so you'll get to engage with this more comfortably in the future. Despite expanding the world to include foreign nations, the only other nation we really visit in this game is Notopia. We don't even get a world map to show us where these countries are. There seems to be one in this meeting room, but it doesn't really tell you which of these countries is which. While a world map isn't entirely necessary, I feel like it would help me stop thinking about how silly it is that traveling back and forth between two countries is somehow the faster way to get to the late game areas. You'd think sending a Navi there over land's home internet would be faster than booking a multiple-hour flight. While I think there was an overall improvement in writing, I did feel that some segments overstayed their welcome, namely the first trip to Notopia, which just kept on slamming you with problem after problem after problem, and the mysterious ice situation that comes after. I already elaborated on this in the spoiler section of the video, but thought I should at least mention it here to caution anyone who skipped that section. A last honorable mention for those interested in multiplayer. I recommend that you look into something known as the gospel duplication glitch. It allows you to get multiple copies of chips that you'd normally only get once per save file if you pick them up without saving and beat the final boss, causing the game to autosave what you picked up, but without removing the mystery data or the shop inventory that you got it from. I suppose this could also be a way to buy lots of chips to throw into the chip trader, but for the amount of effort you have to go through, I can't imagine it being very efficient. So in conclusion, while still not perfect, Mega Man Battle Network 2 greatly improves on the Battle Network formula and blows the previous entry out of the water. This is the reason to play the games in release order. Most people won't want to go back to the oldest games after being spoiled by all the features of the new ones. If this review has you interested in trying Battle Network, definitely go in chronological order, and if you're striving for completion, try to figure out what you can on your own, but don't be afraid to check guides and wikis like the ones I will be linking in the description when you get stuck. Test out your chips, learn the behaviors of enemies, learn the rules of busting levels, and try to build good chip folders for the encounters you'll be facing. Treat the battles like puzzles to be solved and not just obstacles to mindlessly shoot your way through, and you'll be playing like a pro faster than you could have ever anticipated. That's it for me. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and if you're wondering what happened to office hours this year, my summer was busier than expected, and I still have another game review I need to start working on right after this, so I doubt that I'll be able to do much, if anything, for the current school year. But I'll get back to doing office hours as soon as I can. Anyway, have fun, don't forget to do your homework, and remember that ignorance is not bliss. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.